In this video, we're going to talk about how it is impossible for a society which doesn't believe in God and doesn't believe that morality comes from God. So it's impossible for such a society to be a moral society, to be a good society. And we're going to go through it very methodically from the beginning, very logically. We're going to build it up. So watch the end of the video, and at the end of this video, you're going to come out with a crystal clear understanding of why a society which doesn't believe in God cannot be a good and moral society. So let's start from the beginning. So if you would ask people, do you believe that murder is wrong? So 99% of people would say, yes, absolutely, definitely, murder is wrong, murder is terrible, murder is horrible, it's wrong. The problem is, though, is that while 99% of people would agree that murdering a defenseless 30-year-old woman in the street is wrong, other cases become a little bit more complicated. If you would ask, what about murdering a 93-year-old woman on life support? What about murdering a 3-month-old baby who's still in the womb? What about murdering a criminal? What about murdering your enemy in war, right? What about murdering a terrorist? All these questions, and suddenly it becomes a lot more confusing. Suddenly people are not so certain anymore. And the thing is that if we would know why we can't murder a defenseless 30-year-old woman in her prime, we would know, and we'd be able to ask ourselves, does the same reasoning apply to a 3-month-old baby? Does the same reasoning apply to a 93-year-old woman in a coma on life support? And if the same reasoning applies to a 30-year-old woman in her prime and a 93-year-old woman on life support, then we cannot kill the 93-year-old woman. If the same reasoning does not apply, then we could. And therefore, it's important for us to ask the question, and it's important to us to answer the question, why indeed can we not go ahead and kill a 30-year-old woman in her prime, a defenseless woman? And there's two approaches to be taken. There's two approaches out there, two schools of thought. Why indeed can't you just kill someone? Or for that matter, why can't you do anything that we classify as wrong? Why can't you just take somebody's property? Why can't you just punch somebody in the face? Why can't you go and sleep with your mother? Why can't you go and sleep with a dog? Right? All these questions, there's two schools of thought why we can't do all these things. One school of thought is based on the premise that God exists, and the other school of thought is based on the premise that God does not exist. So let's start with the latter school of thought. So in the latter school of thought, in the school of thought of atheism, so God does not exist, which means that there is no God to tell us what's wrong and right. There is no God which is the source of morality. The Bible is definitely not God's word. It's a made-up book. That is not the source of morality. That is not God telling us what's right and wrong. We human beings need to decide, need to come to the conclusion of what is right and wrong, of what is good and bad. Now, the good thing is that the vast majority of people, 99% of people, inherently and instinctively feel that murder is wrong. It makes us humans feel uncomfortable. It makes us feel uneasy and very uncomfortable if we would murder someone, or if we see someone else murder somebody. It would make us feel very, very ill at ease, very uncomfortable. It would really unsettle our conscience. Okay, but if you're logical at all, if you're a logical atheist, you would realize that the fact that you feel in your heart that murder is a bad thing, the fact that murder makes you uncomfortable and you're not comfortable with the idea of murder, that doesn't reflect on anything. That doesn't mean anything. In other words, if you're an atheist and you do not believe in God and you don't believe God created the world, instead this world is a freak accident of nature. It's a freak accident of evolution. So everything about this world, everything in this world, everything about us is a freak accident of nature, is a freak accident of evolution, which means we happen to have 10 fingers, but we could have easily evolved to have 11 fingers or to have 19 fingers. We happen to evolve in a certain way where most of us think a certain way. But humans could have just as easily evolved in such a way where we think entirely differently. We happen to evolve in such a way that most humans find cockroaches and mice disgusting. But again, we could have evolved just as easily into people who actually love the sight of cockroaches and like playing with mice. And we just happened to evolve in such a way that we are disturbed by the concept of murder. Murder makes us very, very ill at ease, very uncomfortable. But just as easily, we could have evolved in such a way that we actually loved murdering. So because of this, the fact that we feel uncomfortable with murder, the fact that we feel uncomfortable with stealing somebody's and destroying somebody else's life, that doesn't reflect or show on any higher truth, on any objective right and wrong, on any objective morality. It just happens to be the way we feel, which again doesn't reflect on anything because the way we feel happens to just be an accident. It's just a freak accident of nature. It's a freak accident of evolution. It has no inherent deeper meaning or value. So if you're a logical atheist, why would you pass into law a law which says nobody's allowed to murder, it's wrong to murder? It's not because we feel it's wrong, because our feelings don't mean anything if you're approaching this objectively and logically. It has no significance how we feel. It doesn't matter. It's just an accident of nature. But it would still be logical. It would still make sense for you to actually outlaw murder, even if you were an objective thinking and logical atheist, because for a very simple reason. Because all laws are essentially, according to the atheistic view of life, the atheistic school of thought, so laws are not a reflection of some higher truth or some objective right and wrong or objective good and evil. Laws are very, very just practical and very pragmatic. And basically, if you have 100 people in a community trying to build a community together, so everybody in this community wants to serve their own best interests, right? Everyone wants to have the best possible life for themselves, the best quality of life. Now, I'm part of this 100-person community. I personally, it's a really, really big priority for me that murder should not be allowed in this community for several reasons. First of all, I personally have no incentive to murder, so there's nothing for me to gain by us allowing murder, because I don't want to ever kill, because it makes me feel uncomfortable again to kill. It makes me uncomfortable to touch cockroaches. It makes me uncomfortable to kill, so I don't want to kill, so I have no incentive to kill. And also, I don't want anybody else to be allowed to kill, because it makes me highly, highly uncomfortable to watch other people kill each other or be killed. So that's one. And B, I don't want myself to be at risk and my wife to be at risk and my kids to be at risk. It's really, really not in my best interest. I would constantly be living in fear and being all defensive if people were walking around killing. I might get killed any moment. So because of that, I'm really going to push, and I'm going to use all my influence in shaping this community to shape it in such a way that murder should not be allowed. It should not be tolerated in this community. Now, the good thing for me is that 99% of the people in this community feel the exact same way. 99% of the people in this community, it's also highly, highly in their best interest not to allow murder. And therefore, since the majority rules, we have the strength. 99% of us are basically going to pass into law that murder is wrong. Murder is not tolerated, because it's in the vast majority of us, our best interest, not to allow for murder. Okay? And that's essentially how all laws are formed in all countries, in all societies. It's basically what's in the best interests of the vast majority of people. Okay, so now what's wrong with that, though? That sounds like it works. It sounds very good. So there's a few problems with coming to morality from this direction, coming to morality in this way. So problem number one is that while it's true that 99% of human beings feel the same way about most major moral issues, most people feel, again, it's wrong to kill. Most people feel it's wrong to destroy somebody else's life, to really hurt somebody else, to really torture somebody else, to really destroy somebody else in all kinds of ways, or to do something really, really obscene, like to sleep with an animal. There is a small demographic amongst the human population which is not programmed this way, which hasn't evolved this way. And for some people, not only do they not find murder distasteful, they actually love to murder. Some people are built in such a way that they have a deep, deep desire and actually a deep need to murder. Like we have a deep desire and need to eat or to procreate. They have a deep, deep need, a deep, deep desire to murder, and it's actually very painful for them and very oppressive for them to not be allowed to murder. Now, this person really, really got unlucky because they were born into a world, they were born into a society where 99% of everybody else, or 98 or 97% of everybody else, it's not in their best interest to murder, and therefore they said murder's wrong. They outlawed murder. But this one unlucky guy is looking around and he's like, why shouldn't I murder? I really feel a need to murder. I really want to murder. I shouldn't murder because you guys all said it's wrong to murder. The reason you guys all said it's wrong to murder is because it's not in your best interest to murder. So that's why you outlawed it and said it's wrong. But it happens to be, it is my best interest to murder. It actually serves me very, very well to murder. And therefore, there's no reason going through that person's head. There's no reason in the world he shouldn't murder. The only reason he wouldn't murder is if it's not in his best interest, and it might not be in his best interest if a cop is going to catch him and throw him in jail for the rest of his life, which would really suck. So that wouldn't be in his best interest. But if he thought he can get away with it, or if he knew he can get away with it, there's absolutely no argument that you're giving him. There's no argument in his head. There's no reason in his head. There's no voice in his head telling him not to murder or why he shouldn't murder. He's not being given any reason or any incentive not to murder. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is it's not just about the 1% or the 5% or the 10% that's evolved a little bit differently and is a little bit more perverse. Even the vast majority of people, 99% of people, so again, most people feel naturally, and it's in the best interest, most people feel it's in their best interest not to allow the murder of a defenseless 30-year-old woman in her prime. But in other cases where the murder is not so disturbing, it's kept a little bit, it's a little cleaner, it's not so disturbing. Let's take an abortion, for example. You don't see the murder, you don't see the person shaking in pain, you don't see the person fighting back, you don't hear the screams, you don't see the blood. It's not so disturbing. All the disturbing imagery is kept away from you. It's done very clinically and very clean. So since you're not so disturbed, suddenly the only reason why you're against murder in the first place is because it really makes you feel bad. It disturbs you very deeply. In a case where murder wouldn't disturb you very deeply, you're dropping a drone from miles away, you never even see the victim, you're doing an abortion. So in all these cases, society at large might get on board with murder because, again, the only reason they outlawed murder generally is because most people really don't like the concept of murder. But in a case where you can package it right and make murder very appealing, people would get behind it. Problem number two, another example, is let's say a certain scenario where murder is really, really in our best interests. Like there's a lot to gain from murder. There's a lot of financial gain, or there's some other kind of gain. There's a lot of gain to oppress these people, or to hurt these people, or to kill these people. Maybe it's in our gain to kill the sick or the elderly, or a lot of people decide it's in their gain to kill the Jews or to kill the Arabs or to kill the blacks, whoever it may be. Suddenly, a whole society can easily flip and get behind killing these people, because the whole reason we don't randomly allow murder, we don't tolerate murder, is because it's not in the best interest of society. It's not in the best interest of the majority of the people. But the moment it would become in the best interest and the self-interest of the majority of the people would flip, or could flip, and it's happened before, and suddenly they would all be behind the murder of this demographic, which is being done in a clean way, in a clinical way, or this demographic is actually highly, highly beneficial to us, and it's highly, highly in our best interest to murder them and eliminate them. And therefore, this kind of relative morality is very, very dangerous and very not secure, and it could shift any moment depending on what's just convenient, basically, for the people of the time. And just here's one very important question to ask yourself. Were there things 500 years ago that were considered very, very immoral, that were considered terrible, which today are considered totally okay, totally fine, totally moral? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Now, were there things 500 years ago that were considered totally okay, totally fine, totally moral, which today are considered the worst, unacceptable, intolerable, immoral? And again, the answer is yes. Now ask yourself this: are there things today which are moral, that are considered moral, which in 500 years humans will probably consider immoral? And I think, and anyone watching this, I think definitely the answer is yes. And are there things today which are considered immoral, which in 500 years from now humans will probably consider okay and moral and accept it? And again, the answer is probably yes. So just what you see from this is that society's conception of morality has nothing to do with objective right and wrong, with real right and wrong. It's so unstable, it's so volatile, it could change at any moment. It's so not real. It's just what serves our purposes best at this moment, and the moment it doesn't serve our purposes anymore, like this, the basic tenets of morality can switch overnight. And such subjective morality is very, very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. Now, the other approach, though, to take to morality is the religious approach. And in the religious approach, you believe that God exists, God created the world, and God also created morality in this world. And morality comes from God. And God tells us what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad, what's holy, what's evil, what's right, what's wrong, what's moral and what's immoral. And the reason that you cannot kill a 30-year-old, defenseless, pregnant woman in the street, in her prime, is not because it makes you feel uncomfortable. It's not because it wouldn't be in society's best interest and society would fall apart if we killed all the young people in the street, then life would just be chaotic. All those things could be true, and those could be secondary reasons why you shouldn't kill people. But at its core, the reason we don't kill a 30-year-old woman is because it's just wrong, because God said it's wrong, because morality says it's wrong, real morality says it's wrong, God says it's wrong, and God dictates morality, and therefore it is wrong. Not because of all the technical reasons. Those technical reasons could happen to be true in that case, but it just happens to be wrong. And because of that, even if you take away the technical reasons, you have a 93-year-old person on life support, which would be really, really convenient to kill them off. You have a baby you don't really want, it would be really, really convenient to kill them off. You have somebody who would be really, really convenient to kill them off, but it doesn't matter if it's convenient to kill it off, because the reason we don't kill people is not because it's convenient not to kill them or it's inconvenient to kill them. We don't kill people because inherently it's wrong. Objectively it's wrong. Morality and morality, wrong and right, good and bad, doesn't change. It doesn't change overnight. It doesn't change in 1,000 years. It doesn't change in 100,000 years. No matter what the situation on the ground is, God is forever and his morality is forever, and good and right cannot be changed. They're pillars of this universe. Objective, right and wrong, and good and bad, and morality and immorality. Right? And this understanding and this mindset and this realization that morality comes from God, and God dictates reality. So this is the basis of any civil and moral society. And this is the basis of the Noahide laws, of the universal code of morality, which the Torah teaches us for all 7 billion human beings. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, this is a very, very important message. It's very important that this message reach eventually all 7 billion people on this planet. So please spread this message to your friends, to your families, everywhere, to everyone you know. Either share this video or just repeat these ideas, because these ideas really, really need to infiltrate all of society, all countries. Everyone has to start realizing that we will only be safe in this world. Societies will only remain safe and stable in the long run when we come and realize that morality comes from God and that God exists. So God bless you and have a wonderful day.